All right, well, I think we'll get started. Welcome to our celebration of Light, both Light Quarterly and The Man Behind Light, print journal devoted entirely to comic verse. And John, as most of you also know, sadly died in April, leaving the future of Light somewhat in doubt, but we're working to figure out a way to keep it going. In a few minutes, in John's honor, we'll be having what I'm pretty sure is the biggest and funniest poetry reading since the days of Phyllis McGinley and Ogden Nash. We've got an amazing lineup of people here, more than a dozen readers, all of whom have appeared in Light, many of whom, including the three of us, have been featured poets in Light. And we'll be reading poems of ours that John accepted for the magazine, as well as some poems by frequent Light contributors who either have wave, hence the little wave doodle that graces every cover of Light, and the name that he gave himself when he wrote pieces for the magazine, Particle. The more I learn about John, the more I realize he was full of surprises himself. This started early. He was born in Chicago 70 years ago, the son of a lawyer, his father, and a teacher and singer, his mother. His sister Margarita, the oldest of John's 7 siblings, says that her little brother was on the one hand a very precociously studious kid. He started memorizing poems very young, and by the age of 11 or so was reading the likes of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. On the other hand, Margarita says he had what she calls a wild streak. He once got in big trouble for egging a neighbor's house, and she points out that this was in the days before egging became a semi-socially acceptable form of Halloween mayhem. And he and his brother Bill used to do chemistry experiments in the family basement. Quote, "You'd hear this coughing and gasping, and sometimes explosions." Then, the boy who egged houses and trashed his parents' basement went to Catholic seminary, of course, intending to become a priest and missionary. But he soon abandoned that idea. Lisa Marquardt, Light's longtime managing editor, suggests that this was maybe because John liked girls too much. John also remained crazy about literature. He got a master's in English Lit from Loyola University. A paper of his about Nabokov's Pale Fire, which is his favorite book, would later appear in the journal Nabokov Studies. He was an adjunct teacher at Columbia College in Chicago and various other places. To quote the obituary written by one of John's brothers, students of John's would be treated to lectures that might begin with Milton and end with remarkable thematic fidelity, with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. But a shock to many people when they learn about the erudite editor of Light, John spent 3 decades working for the downtown Chicago post office. He started when he was a grad student, and he stayed on after he realized he didn't feel called to teaching. For most of his years at the post office, he did grunt work, like loading mail bags. Although he ended in a supervisory role, he turned down a lot of promotions. His idea, Margarita tells me, was to support himself with a job that wasn't too mentally taxing. I asked him, "Why do you do that dumb job?" she remembers. And he said, "Because then I can do what I really care about." And what he cared about was his writing. John wrote a lot of poems, many of them, surprisingly, on the dark side. They appeared in the Carolina Quarterly, Prairie Schooner, and Chicago Review, and got awards from the Illinois Arts Council. He also published a not very lighthearted novel called Transformations in 1976. It's hard to find these days. I could not get my hands on a copy in time to read it before this panel. But those who have read it have described it to me variously as incredible and very powerful, weird, proto-steampunk, and a labyrinthine narrative penetrable after perhaps 2 close readings and adroitly laced with unacknowledged allusions to seminal writers from Shakespeare to T.S. Eliot. John wrote one more novel, Tower of Blood, which is yet to be published. But his best-known contribution to the world of letters, of course, was Light Quarterly. In a charming essay that appeared in Light a few years ago, John describes how the magazine was his mother's idea. The two of them were lunching one day when she pointed out that magazines had largely quit printing funny, memorable poems, which gave him a real void to fill. And John, who loved comic verse for its wit and for its frequent love of language, jumped at the chance to help bring Light verse back. His love of wordplay will be no surprise to those who are familiar with the crossword puzzles he used to craft for Chicago Magazine. Apparently they were very, very hard crossword puzzles. Before launching Light, John got advice from Bob Wallace, who was the publisher of a defunct Light verse journal called Light Year. Do any of you, some of you published there? Yeah. And we have a copy floating around here in case the lineup of people who were in that was mind-blowing. But despite the advice, John's vision for Light Quarterly was entirely his own. From his often flowery editorial style to the wide range of poets he printed. Despite the magazine's name, he didn't believe that light verse has to be about lightweight subjects. Although he loved the purely playful work of poets like May Scanlon and Max Gutman, he also printed the likes of Tom Dish, Gail White, and Richard Wakefield. Other regulars in Light, besides a number of people in this room, have been X.J. Kennedy, Willard Espy, Joyce Lemairs, Pat D'Amico, Fred Yanantuno. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. Maureen Cannon, Dan Campion, Timothy Murphy, J. Patrick Lewis, John Morgan, Philip Appleman, Ed Shackley, Charles Eny. I could really go on and on. Maybe the most famous writer to appear in Light ever was John Updike, but he didn't earn his spot in Light easily. When he submitted a poem to Light several years ago, John Mella rejected it. His letter to Updike explained that he didn't print poems that contained swear words. Then he told Updike something like, "Just because you're a famous and talented writer doesn't mean we can make exceptions for you." Updike, I'm told, was amused. He resubmitted the poem, and John accepted it. But more on John and swear words later. For now, another unexpected thing about him. Although he was married only briefly and didn't have children, he was a great family man. After his mother had a stroke in the mid-1990s, John lived with and cared for her for 11 years. He would play in the park with friends' children, and this is maybe my favorite story about him. He would sometimes hide polished stones in the park for the kids to find, and he would tell them they were magic stones. And the kids were young enough to believe him. For adult friends, John's magic stones were the hundreds and maybe thousands of poems he had committed to memory and was ready to recite at the drop of a hat. Milton, Keats, Poe, Spencer, Dickinson, Hardy, quote, he would recite poetry very frequently and spontaneously, Lisa Marquardt remembers. You'd be cooking or something, and he'd start reciting. It would be an interjection of almost supernatural beauty while you were doing something mundane. My brain would wake up. As those of us who heard John recite in person can attest, he was a very lively reader, putting his whole body into it. Last year, when I finally met him after years of correspondence, he recited P.G. Woodhouse's hilarious Printer's Editor during lunch with so much feeling, I'm pretty sure everybody in the restaurant was listening, including the waitstaff. That energy and generosity informed his work at Light as well. Except for the past few years, after Light received a very generous donation, John kept the magazine going with his postal income, and he never took a salary for Light. Until his death, he read and approved every single poem that appeared in the magazine. The upcoming tribute issue is the only issue for which that is not the case. When working with writers, John was generous too. His acceptance letters not only mentioned which poems of yours he was taking, but what he liked about them. Whenever a reader sent a letter complimenting a poem that you had written, John would copy it and send it along to you. But as John Updike discovered, along with a lot of us here, I imagine, John was not always easy to please. In 2004, I submitted a poem to Light called Epiphany while reading People magazine that sparked quite a back and forth between me and John. Okay, here's the poem, which is fairly short. Epiphany while reading People magazine, with apologies to Franklin P. Adams. If I could trade the things I own for all the stuff you've got, the gabled mansion on the Rhone, the 59-foot yacht, the gardens, pools, and tennis courts, the Prada evening dress, the chef who makes you salmon torts, would I find happiness? Would I be glad to leave the house that's kept me snug for years, to lose the shrubs I've pruned, the blouse I found half price at Sears? Would I be gleeful as I fled my friendly neighborhood to join the upper crust instead? You bet your ass I would. And here is part of a note I received from John about that poem. Dear Melissa, I meant to suggest in your amusing epiphany while reading People magazine that you change in the last line, ass to tail, or another euphemism of your choice. I find that such words in common usage are yet enough to offend my elderly and sensitive audience. For some reason, butts and nuts in your barnyard beef doesn't hit me the same way. I'm sorry I neglected to do this, and I hope you won't mind being flexible in this regard. I'm proud to say I won that battle. Ass stayed in. But the next victory over my use in another poem of the word bird shit went to John. Imagine my amazement at learning after John's death that his own comic poems were sometimes on the R-rated side and even X-rated. But it's true that they didn't appear in the pages of Light. Neither did his G-rated or PG-rated ones, which is a shame, because I think his readers, whether elderly and sensitive or young and insensitive, would have enjoyed them. Here's one of my favorite poems by John. Ode to a Simile. Smile, simile, you're pink as a peach. You're wise as a turtle awash on a beach. You're swift as a bird on a billow of air. You're stylish as tuxes, champagne, or Astaire. You're pretty, you're witty, you've oodles of things to compare yourself to, like blue diamonds, gold rings. What aren't you good as? Is there any limit? Not likely, no siree, it's plain. Oh, sorry. Is there any glass that you won't sometimes brim it? Not likely, no siree, it's plain as a pickerel. You're there when we need you, right here, where it's thicker. Well, when the world's in a muddle and all things seem to pass, there's nothing that saves it so well as your ass. Surprising, isn't it? A number of John's other poems will be appearing in the next issue of Light, which is in part a tribute to him. And now to continue celebrating John's work as an editor, which is our main project here, I will kick off our readings with another poem of mine that he accepted for Light much more recently. And then I'll introduce the impressive and hilarious gentleman to my right, and then we'll be having a number of readings. So here's my poem, Walking In on People. It's just a talent that I've always had, though not, thank God, around my mom and dad. They did the deed. As living proof, I knew it, and yet I somehow never saw them do it. The same cannot be said, regrettably, of roommates, colleagues, hosts, and 2 or 3 romantic pairs whose panting thrusts and reaches were glimpsed by me on isolated beaches. Of poets who, shared sitting rooms be damned, I witnessed at a conference and jammed. Of friends rebounding from a recent breakup, and once 2 mimes in nothing but their makeup. They goggled up at me with mute surprise, their mouths a pair of O's that matched their eyes, his hands suspended in midair to pet her. Marcel Marceau could not have done it better. Why me? Why all this unintended shock? I wish I knew. I don't forget to knock. I never tiptoe like a ballerina. And still, I'm like some peeping Thomasina. My consolation is I get for free a version of what some folks pay to see. Instead of porno actors in flagranti, I'm bound to catch a glimpse of someone's auntie. And though it will humiliate us both while prompting an unconscionable oath from Uncle Irving, Archibald, or Maury, it's guaranteed to make a better story. Few funny poets alive can boast the kind of credentials that these two gentlemen can. Besides the fact that they are both brilliantly and prolifically funny, here are just a few of the things you should know about them. Bob McKenty. His poems about almost any subject you can name, but especially about sports, have appeared in the New York Times, 3 sections of it, the Wall Street Journal, the Reader's Digest, and many college textbooks and anthologies, including the Random House Treasury of Light Verse and the Poets of New Jersey, which, he is pleased to note, includes works by real poets like Maxine Kumin and Robert Pinsky. Bob has won the Howard Nemeroff Sonnet Prize. And a couple of fun stats for you baseball fans. He is recited at the National Baseball Hall of Fame and had a poem read by Ralph Kiner during a Mets telecast. Bob's book of baseball poems, Fair Game, from Doggerel Days Press, will be available in this room after our session. That's correct, right? Okay, good. Okay. Edmund Conti. Known for his often brief and always clever poems, Ed won the very first Willard R. Espy Foundation Light Verse Prize. His work has appeared in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, every issue of Light Year, the publication I mentioned earlier, the popular textbook Bedford Introduction to Literature, and like Bob's, the Random House Treasury of Light Verse. All this is impressive enough on its own, but even more so when you learn that Ed didn't start writing poetry till he was in his 50s. That's what I'm told.
You can't remember that far back.
And he's now still in his 50s. Ed has several books to his credit, including the very amusing Quiblets, some copies of which I believe will also be available here after our talk.
They're all free.
That's quite a deal, I have to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob and Ed, and then I will announce the first of our readers, and then we'll just keep going. I'll put the list up there so you can introduce each other. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I was going to do a riff on whatever Bob said, but he's not going to say anything. So I'll have to say some inane remarks first so I can do a riff on those. I met John, we both met John at the same time when he came to visit our group, the Barge Buffet. A bunch of really good poets, most of them who've been in featured poets in Light. And I don't remember too much about him. He was talking to all of us, and I remember saying to him, I thought you'd be fat. He really gave me a dirty look like, what do I say? He wasn't fat, so. Anyway, he kept publishing my poems. He really published a lot of them. Of course, Bob has a lot more. Bob has always one more than me, whatever I do. I try to be in competition with Bob, but that's like the Red Sox thinking they're in competition with the Yankees. some poems. So I want to read one by Gail White. I promised her. She's supposed to be here, but she's in Italy, and all in all, she'd rather be there than near Philadelphia. If I can find it. This is, I'm not really fumbling and fumbling here. This is all staged, so I'm not reading too fast. Well, I want to show you some of the slides. This is the first issue. The big, if you haven't seen them, this is the fat one. A quarterly of humorous, occasional, ephemeral, and light verse. Later on, it became a quarterly of light verse. This is Anthony Ant, my love child. I have a poem of Anthony Ant here, but since you've been a good audience so far, I won't read it. But I will read this poem by Gail when I find it. The Panda. The panda bear was never meant to flourish on this continent. At best it can digest a few green shots of succulent bamboo. Its young are born so very small, it needs to be marsupial. The animal so badly jinxed should properly have been extinct. That's a horrible rhyme. No fundraising propaganda works half as well as Save the Panda. Why? Because we can't resist this furry fat contortionist whose too hot melting blackened eyes would win the Hallmark cutest prize. The moral is, if you've a cause for which you need the world's applause, and pots of cash or all is lost, be cute at any cost. So I'm going to try to be cute. This is a collector's copy. I don't know what I'm collecting. This is where I'm the featured poet. Because the big deal here is the Gavin, you an issue, which is in 18 font or something. I'm down here, featured poet, 9. Okay, all right. Bob, that's John getting back at me. Okay, let's start off with something serious and spiritual. Two's company. Sweet are the uses of divinity, and sweeter yet in keeping us engrossed is the simple, complex concept of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Is making sense of them too much a bother? Is there any way to master 3 in 1? The Son, the Holy Ghost, and Father, the Holy Ghost, the Father, and the Son. I use this ancient form, the cranky sonnet, to crank out my aberrant Dunciad, see what evolves from overthinking on it, to spook the kid, dare I say it, Dad. It's true that forms are made by fools like me, but only God can make himself a 3. I'm indebted to John for all these poems he published of mine, and for 2 more things. One is, he got me into the New Yorker. How he did that was he put an ad in the New Yorker with my little poem in it. Hey, I'm a New Yorker. And he helped me win $1,000 for this, for my $1,000 poem, which was the first winner of the SB Foundation Prize for Light Verse. I had published this originally in Radisphere, back somewhere after the last century ended and the first one, the next one began. And I think that's when he invented meth. Indication of how people liked it. So I put it aside and I sent it to John. He said, okay, it's too long for light. So the guy had this nice long poem, unpublished. And then the foundation came along and said, we want a nice long unpublished poem, and nobody else had one except me, so I won this prize. So thank you, John, for that. A couple of guys called Ben and Don. You have heard of Ben and Jerry and the ice cream full of fat, and you think their life is merry, but the land pizzazz éclat. And you wish so very, very much your life were not so flat. Oh, to be like Ben and Jerry, that would be a superstar. Or to be like Tom and Jerry, there's a happy cat and mouse. Neither one is the equerry, neither one is the nagging spouse. Or to be like Frank and Regis, each of them would Kathy Lee. You wouldn't even need an Aegis to protect you, no siree. But I know a winsome twosome, whose exploits are worth a chat. Scary, memorable, and gruesome. It's a life magnificat. They've done overs, they've done unders. They have docked at Arawak. Let me introduce these wonders. Bend there and don that. They have done moon exploration, they have hobnobbed with the stars, and they're thinking spring vacation on the beaches up at Mars. They have done the Riviera, fully clothed in old mat. They've played catch with Yogi Berra. Been there and down that. They have seen the stone at Mecca. They have chatted with the Pope, had a platinum with Decca, and went on the road with hope. They have wrestled, each of them with God, and they took him to the mat. They have walked upon hot coals unshod. Been there and down that. They have peace corps in Bolivia. They have hunted where it's levity. They have mastered so much trivia that they won 3 times on Jeopardy. They have waked themselves on Everest. There's no place they haven't shot. Go goes, they never rest. Been there and down that. Let me read my throwaway poems. These are also in white. Row, row, row their boat. I'm not hip to life on the ship. Do I have to tip the man with the whip? In my New Yorker poem. Somehow I didn't get a title in there. Said William Shake to Francis Bake, let's wine and dine, your plays or mine. Oh, if you're going to go on this one. Michael, Reggie, and Jesse. Anglo-Saxons, not these Jacksons. Food chain. I'd rather eat a pita than meet a cheetah. Sibling rivalry. Abel and Kane, their story is sad, one of them good, the other one bad. Had nothing in common, except for their mom, their dad. Drake's piece of cake. The Spanish Armada, de nada. Dim and Dimmer, this is a limerick. There once were 2 ricks, well you can see where this one's going. There once were 2 ricks, one the dimmer rick, had this idea for a limerick. Discuss truth and beauty, and doing one's duty. Say, why don't you let that one simmer, Rick? What's an Eskimo son to do? Mom, it's for the best. We're getting old, you know. Don't wail or protest. Go with the flow. Yeah, in memoriam. This is I wrote this for to John Betjeman. I don't know if I can even pronounce his name. Is that how you say it? John Betjeman? Yeah. John Betjeman. In memoriam. John Betjeman cannot read his in memoriam, not today or ever. So what's the use of writing another job, wide freight endeavor? For he who could best compose what is decomposing, rot away forever. The spirit lives in every England nook, where England claims the heart and soul. That poet so lightly musical, so serious and straight, and art and droll, whose lines were seen and heard in every church and every mark and knoll. Buckbeat comes Sparrowby, comes Sphinx, County, Westmead, Cheltenham, the Set, Henley on Thames, also Highgate, Bristol, Clifton, Mint-on-Land, Gazette, places etched forever in his poems, each one a Betchagram, Gibet. We remember Chintzy Cheerios and his brilliant combinations, Cheery Bye. Farewell, so long, Bongowski, to farewell to all his permutations, never grim, never dry. Well, it's getting time for supper, and we've had our ruminations. This is him, Dry Your Eye. Thank you.
was in the initial issue was a mere couplet, and it was very Conti-esque in its brevity and its visual pun. So you have to visualize this in your mind's eye. The lethargic lion loafs all day, on occasion taking pause to pray. I can wait too. USA Today and the Jackson, Tennessee Sentinel both reviewed this, the initial issue of Light, and quoted my poem, and John sent me the blurbs on that, which was a gracious thing he always did. And I figured they used my poem, not because it was the best poem, but because it was the shortest. But it wasn't. The shortest poem in that issue was Norman Rockwell Painted Schlockwell. Don't laugh at that. I don't like that. It's like a Clara, it reads like an unfinished Clara hue. And Norman Rockwell's my favorite artist, along with N.C. Wyeth down the road a piece in Chad's Ford, because you know, I kind of like my artists to be formalists too. Some time later, my lamb would join my lion in the pages of Light. He gambles to the shearer's shear, and soon his woolies disappear, and thus he gets his just deserts, for gamblers always lose their shirts. And I discovered as a result of this that John really seemed to like poems about animals, any kind of animals, fish, birds, even a paramecium that I had. Here's one called The Oddest Animal. Of all the creatures on the ground and in the sea and sky, of all the animals around, the oddest one? Why, I haven't got a gill or fin, or yet a single feather, nor am I blessed with furry skin to cope with winter weather. I haven't even got a tail, my hair's begun to shed, my claws are delicate and frail, my teeth are laced with lead. At running I am rather slow, encumbered by this tummy, yet still I thrive, which goes to show that Darwin was a dummy. But I came to Darwin's defense sometime later when the Board of Education in Kansas declared that they made it illegal to teach the Big Bang Theory or evolution. And so I said, in Kansas, where they like their status quo, the Big Bang's out and Darwin has been dropped. Their educators want the world to know that Kansas is where evolution stopped. From the very initial issue of Light, John was very much enamored of the river rhyme, which was a concoction of Bill Cole's, which is only loosely called a form, because the only rules that applied to it were that it had to mention a body of water or even the shore in the first line. It had to rhyme, and it had to be funny. And John had a feature in there for maybe first 4 years. Every issue had river rhymes. Bill Cole contributed, but it wasn't eligible for the prizes that they gave. Tokens at the end of each year, they would announce the winners, and usually Ed was one of them because he always had something in there too. And Cole wasn't eligible. My favorite Bill Cole river rhyme appeared when he was featured poet in issue number 19. It was flood time on the Seine, flotsam, jetsam, garbage. Then 5 cats floating on a plank. 1, 2, 3, cats sank. Poem has got better laughs than mine. Rockwell in this one. Anyway, another popular topic in Light was politics, particularly if you were into skewering Republicans. But Maureen Cannon, who was very liberal in her politics but never into skewering, wrote The Politician in the Pew. His very public piety achieved such notoriety that, just as he had suspected, in time he was elected. Accomplishing his purpose thus, he grew less sanctimonious until, a private citizen again, once more he breathed his last amen and never went to church again. Always room for parody in light. Here's one by Henry Fisher, another member of our Bard's Buffet group. Closing time, right you are. Draw one more pint for me, and let there be no foaming on the bar when I go out to pee. Bill, Maureen, and Henry have since died, and Ed and I are members of Generation X, spelled EX. But the future of light verse is in good hands, particularly the hands of our moderator, Melissa, who has tried not to give too many of her own poems because she wants to, keep this thing going. So all right, well, I'll do one of hers. It's called Egypt. They saved their gold and jewels to buy the finest in sarcophagi and scrolls describing how they plan to live forever in a land of peace and dainty dishes. Now in a gallery they lie, where hordes from Brooklyn, never shy, compete to gobble all the canned historic info they can stand, then chase it with knishes. One subject that never got into light, almost never, was sports, which distressed me greatly because that's what I wrote the most about, particularly baseball, right? Fair game, open season on baseball. In 20 years, I am aware of 2 baseball poems that have appeared in light, one early on by J. Patrick Lewis and one by me. But when my book came out, John Mella, with great disdain for baseball, wrote a glowing review of the book, so I'm grateful to him for that. I think this was in the issue in which I was the featured poet. Recently, R.A. Dickey, the Mets knuckleball pitcher, came out with a memoir in which he revealed that he had been abused sexually as a boy. And that was the first time he revealed that. For the first time, I'd like to reveal to you that I was abused as a baby. That's the title. My psyche's a mess. Yes, it may be that I was abused as a baby. My shrink is regressing me now to a watery, dark place where, ow! I am being extruded, the gall, through a channel 3 sizes too small. From the warmth of a comfortable womb to the glare of a stark, sterile room, where I'm held upside down by some nut who is slapping me hard on the butt. God, I'm covered with blood. Will I die? Still the sadists all smile when I cry. I'm stark naked. Stop staring. Oh, damn, there's a guy with a video cam. Put that camera down. Are you sick? Are you making a kiddie porn flick? Worse than that, it's a snuff film. Help, Mummy. Someone's scissors are aimed at my tummy. Later on, a masked man in green hat with a scalpel. Hey, man, don't cut that. I'm exhausted and frightened and sore. Beam me back. I can't take any more. What a trauma. Incredible stress. It's no wonder my psyche's a mess. I don't know if John knew it. I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in the 3rd floor walk-up of a 4-story apartment building in Queens in the outer borough of New York City. And here is a memoir poem that's a little bit more accurate. They didn't have video cams when I was born. It's called I Remember, I Try to Remember. I remember my childhood domicile, a proud apartment building in a pseudo-Tudor style. 3 rooms, a bath, a hallway, and a Spartan kitchenette. In every room, an ashtray with a burning cigarette. I remember the radiator's knock, the old dumbwaiter in the hall where roaches ran amok, the fire escape, our balcony in the stately oak tree's shade, where I would sit on summer days imbibing lemonade. I remember on the street 3 floors below, good humor bells in summertime, in winter, crunchy snow, and on the roof 2 flights above, the smell of hand-washed clothes hung out upon the line to dry. In wintertime, they froze. I remember the days of World War II, its air raid drills and rationing with tokens, red and blue. I recall Dad's console radio and the voice of FDR. But today I can't remember where the hell I parked my car. This poem was not selected by Mella, but it was selected by Ed because he was writing my appreciation. And it's about our daughter Teresa, who was in her early 20s and went out one morning even before I got up at 5:30 to write on a Saturday morning. And a note she left behind said, "Dear Mom and Dad, I didn't want to worry you. I'm sorry for sneaking out like this, but I just went to a place in South Jersey called Adrenaline Adventures to go bungee jumping from a hot air balloon. Not to worry, love, Teresa." When she got back, she did. Yeah, she did. This was on top of her note. Teresa's excellent adrenaline adventure. Today, Teresa's on a high, bungee jumping in the sky, plunging with a sudden swoon from a big hot air balloon tethered by a tenuous rubber band umbilicus. The ground comes rushing toward her nose, then boing, and up, up, up she goes. From north to south and south to north, Teresa's shuttled back and forth as Mother Earth and Sister Sky say, "Here, you take her." "No, not I." Still having got her money's worth, our yo-yo comes back down to earth. But this is not about me. This is about John Mella, and I have one poem to deliver which was not in the Pages of Light because there hasn't been an issue since he died. I've never gotten a rejection slip from Mella, by the way, or even an acceptance. I had a newsletter that I published, and I put him on the distribution list, and he just mined the thing however he wanted, whenever he wanted. He picked whatever he liked. This one he never saw, but I hope he'll like it. The Legacy of John Mella. He left the light on for us, the Muses Motel 6, a refuge to restore us, where wordsmiths turn their tricks, a venue for the cranky, a trysting place for lovers of verbal hanky-panky indulged beneath its covers, a haven from the stresses that plague us day to day, and modern life's excesses. Relax, enjoy your stay. And toast innkeeper Mella, that late great logophile, our craft's most happy fella, who got us all to smile. Now that should be the final poem, but it won't be. Because I have this thing I like to finish on a song. So if you would please consider this not a funereal event in any way, but an Irish wake. It will give me an excuse for singing my St. Patrick's Day song, When Irish Cheeks Are Ruddy. And that will be it. When Irish cheeks are ruddy, 'cause it's 30 in the shade, and it's overcast and cruddy, and it dampens his parade. Still Irish warmth keeps glowing, for despite the bitter breeze, an Irishman keeps going, 'cause he's filled with antifreeze.
Thank you both so much. That was I can't express how hilarious that was. Now we have more hilarity. We have a wonderful lineup of readers, and I've got it, I'm sorry, really messily written on this piece of paper, and I'm going to put it up on the podium. And if you all would just wait for the laughter to die down, then announce the next reader, that would be wonderful. We're going to start off. We have, I believe, 14 readers. And if I have left anyone off the list, God forbid, please let me know. We're going to start off with Susan McLean. And should I read the order just so people will know? We had meant to go over this ahead of time, and I don't want like surprises. Okay, so Susan McLean, A.M. Juster, Claudia Gary, Bruce Bennett, Alfred Nicol, Julie Kane, J.D. Smith, A.E. Stallings, Barbara Lotes, Kevin Durkin, Alexandra Oliver, Andrew Periale, David Yezzi, and R.S. Gwynn. Okay, so Susan, if you'll start us off, and I'll put this up on the podium.
Edgar Allan Poe once said that the most perfect subject for poetry was the death of a beautiful young woman. This is called morbid interest. How unpleasant to meet Mr. Poe. It gives the young lady a chill when just as she's saying hello, he asks if she's lately been ill. It was mid-afternoon and he seemed to be tipsy or mildly sedated. How oddly his mournful eyes gleamed when he heard that we might be related. He muttered some rhymes for my name, saying nothing could be more inspiring to a poet desirous of fame than the sight of young beauties expiring. Then he asked if I had a bad cough or a semi-conversible crow. I informed him of where to get off. How unpleasant to meet Mr. Poe. You may know that in Titus Andronicus, Titus serves the children of Tamara to her baked in a pie. This is called Picky Eater. Higgledy-piggledy, Titus Andronicus said to Queen Tamara, "Stop being rude. Dinner guests shouldn't be over-particular. Plus, you have already played with your food." And finally, John Mella occasionally took poems that weren't exactly jokes. This is called Fat Sally's Love Song, and it's a blues poem. A skinny girl's got ice cubes in her soul. She'll give you half and never give you whole. But when I eat ice cream, I lick the bowl. A skinny girl's too needy to stay true. Her bony hips will poke you black and blue. Come find out what my featherbed will do. A skinny girl may look good by your side. She may buff up the finish on your pride. But call me if you need to bum a ride. A skinny girl will marry you for money and never laugh at jokes you know are funny. But you can share my biscuits, pass the honey. A skinny girl's got black holes in her eyes. She won't be happy till the day she dies. If you want lovin', try me on for size. And the next reader is A.M. Juster.
This is an emotional moment for me. I had no idea until this morning that my stones weren't magic. I only have 6 poems. A consolation of aging. Despite my thinning hair, no barber cuts his rate. At least the airlines care and do not charge by weight. To my ambitious colleague, your uphill climb will never stop. Scum always rises to the top. On the death of B.F. Skinner, the headlines were unanimous from Newsweek to Le Monde. No matter what the stimulus, B.F. did not respond. And I'd like to close close with a sequence. Greeting card verse for offbeat occasions. Prostitution arrest. I know the press recorded your alleged solicitation, and though it seems quite sordid, I just know you'll get probation. Food poisoning of guests. I'm sorry my sashimi was rotting on the docks. Whenever you next see me, I'll only serve you lox. Botched intimate tattoo. Your tattoo artist was a jerk and sloppy in his spelling. But given where he put his work, nobody will be telling. Claudia Garrett.
I'm not sure you all heard, this is Claudia Gary.
I had the occasion to meet John Mella once, which was in December 2009, and a memorial service for Richard Moore was another regular in Light quarterly. John was a really very enjoyable conversationalist and very, very nice person, besides what he presented to us in Light quarterly. Fashion statement. Taste, luxury, humor. The inscription, it's a line from a catalog of designer clothing. So here's the poem. This latest fashion catalog you've sent is filled with golden uniforms designed for frozen women who have almost meant, at times, to say something. Oh, never mind. The NSA replies to allegations of pillow talk surveillance. You may have heard about that several years ago. We know you're not a terrorist. We hate this drastic measure, but hope our needs can coexist. We feel your pain and pleasure. Pleasures disproven, wherein the now dispassionate shepherd contemplates divorce. Oh, ecstasy, oh, life of glee, if she'd agree my ex to be. No broken necks, no need to vex, no sheepish sex, just writing checks. News of a bull market, and this was back this was several years ago, you'll get the drift. A financial advisor to Pfizer said this marketing couldn't be wiser, whether curing his ills or enhancing his skills, every man will pop pills as he plies her. And so sorry, these are two telephone poems. So sorry, shall I call back later? But no, you only want me to acknowledge that you stand dripping as we speak, your phone's cord stretching, nipping at the towel edge. You've such a way of flaunting your physique. And call waiting. You've struck gold in a telephonic mine. Two sobbing women dangle from your line. One wants to stay, the other will not go. Just click that button twice. Hello? Hello? Thank you. The next is Bruce Bennett.
I asked Melissa if I could say a word first. I have been in Light from the first or second issue, and I think many people here would agree that Light not only is the one place you think about for this kind of verse, but we all hope very much that it somehow continues. I know that many of the poems I've written are because of the existence of Light. When I'm thinking about a poem, or I start to write it, I think this is a light poem. And whether it got accepted or not, I think it really begat a great many poems, and I think that would be true for a lot of us. John published several rhymed fables of mine. I wanted to read a couple. People have mentioned that he liked poems about animals. So fables are poems about animals. These two also happen to be about women. Conjugal compliments. An alligator, sick about her skin, whined to her husband, "I've begun to sag." "My dear," he reassured her with a grin, "I'm sure you'll look quite smashing as a bag." When age encroaches and you rue the day, who but a spouse can make you feel okay? Unappreciated. A female salmon, swimming hard to spawn, found herself thinking, "I am just a pawn. I toil up rapids, set upon by bears, to lay 1,000 eggs, and no one cares." No woman wants to not be seen a winner. Buy something nice and take her out to dinner. I did some higgledy-piggledies. This is star-crossed. Higgledy-piggledy, Romeo Montague, head over heels with his enemy's kid, wedded her, bedded her, rushed back from Mantua, died as she woke again. Sorry he did. Prettily, wittily, Juliet Capulet, married to Romeo, buried alive, woke from her stupor to great disappointment and acted decisively. End of Act 5. Illustrious dropout. Emily Dickinson went to Mount Holyoke, didn't quite make it because of a vow, went back to Amherst with heartbreak and loneliness, majored in poems, and look at her now. Several people have talked about aging. Sam said that he's grown old. Bob was talking, read the poem I remember. Mike wrote on aging. I had one a little while ago. It's called Lost But Not Forgotten. My short-term memory is shot. My long-term memory is not. Tomorrow I will not recall my having written this at all. But in a dozen years or two, I'll write it down as if it's new. In fact, though I cannot be sure, I might have written this before. And I hate to say it, I think that's literally true. This is called Elementary Biology. A lamb grows up to be a sheep. That isn't hard. It isn't deep. That sheep will be a ewe or ram, depending on the kind of lamb. Sense and sensibility. The information dogs receive from sniffing things that others leave is not so different in kind from what some scholars leave and find. And one of the reasons light meant so much to me, and I hope it means so much to me, is that I would often read the new issue and come out with several poems as response poems. And we all know and love Joe Kennedy. He wrote a poem called Wired Love. So this is his poem. Their passion, kindled on the internet, guttered at once to ashes when they met. True soulmates who could virtually feel. Too bad they had to face off in the real. And my response is in the poem called Glowmates. Too bad, yet when they went back to the screen, love bloomed again, sweet-scented, fervent, keen. They learned their lesson, never more to meet. They savor glorious union, then delete. And finally, short poems, Rationale. All things come to those who wait. That's why I procrastinate. And I've always been proud of this one, and I was glad it was in Light. It's a title with two biggest things I could think of, and it's just slightly over a line long. Eternal recurrence and the Big Bang. An accident waiting to happen again. And the next reader is Alfred Nicol.
Alfred Nicol.
Persnickety Ichabod's rhyming diary was serialized in Light magazine over 9 issues. I'm going to read you every entry that I'm going to read you today happened in just a couple of days. He was writing furiously for these 2 days. Yeah. So in this installment, Ichabod breaks off his relationship with Tedia, whom he had taken so for granted that we have not seen her name mentioned in the diary till now, the 5th of the month. The love affair ended today. I have said what I needed to say. It was honest, succinct, and it got us unlinked. I don't like you, so please go away. Later the same day, my Tedia showed no surprise. I detected relief in her eyes. As our sand castle tumbled, she kicked it and mumbled, "When summer's gone, so are the flies." Still later the same day, perhaps I'm supposed to be sad, and to weep like a Shropshire lad, or to bleat like a goat, or in some way emote. That sort of thing bores me a tad. The 5th of the month again, or the 6th of the month. I've stayed awake half of the night. She'll perceive what I said as a slight, but why second guess when she couldn't care less? I just worry that someone else might. The 6th. Enough of this. Time for some rest. It's to bed without getting undressed. The sun will rise, surely, and I'll get up early, get a head start on being depressed. The 7th. There, this isn't the prison I thought. I'm lucky to have what I've got. There's my window, my flower, my illusion of power, my tie with its snug little knot. The 8th. The cold and indifferent sun has impaled my thin shadow upon the frost-mottled street, where it clings to my feet in despair. I can't lift them to run. The 9th. Okay, I exaggerate some. Overwhelmed by the depths I must plumb. In the sea of despair, I supply my own air while exploring the wreck I've become.
And this one is called New Cute Guy. Not sure yet if he's straight or gay. I'll just bet he feels the same way. This is Looker. This morning in the grocery store, I felt the bag boys stare, the way men used to stare at me, down to my underwear. Was it the 7 pounds I'd lost? I struck a sexy pose. When I got home, the mirror showed a black smudge on my nose. And plea bargain. Inside the scanner's tunnel, You swear that you will be a candidate for sainthood if spared from the big sea. You'll help to feed the hungry. You'll comfort the bereft. You'll minister to lepers if there are any left. But when the doctors tell you that you were in the pink, the terms that you agreed to seem rather harsh, you think. Perhaps another kitten, a shelter rescue pet, or pound of fair trade coffee would settle up the debt. And I'll end with another one by Gail White, my fellow Louisiana poet. It's called On Louisiana Politics, and it goes, let's see, on Louisiana politics. The politician, like the tabbies young, attempts to clean his backside with his tongue. And the next reader is J.D. Smith. Yay!
I never had the privilege of meeting John Mella, but I had some funny correspondence with him, which I wasn't able to retrieve from my email account last night, but I can find it and forward it to others if they're interested. I'm going to read a few poems called Critter Hues, which is a clarihue with the name of an animal instead of a person, and John indulged my fascination with the animal world. And I will have a total of 6. A gerbil would dribble and burble if it ate with a spoon, but you won't see that soon. The hippopotamus can make quite a fuss, as would anyone who weighs more than a ton. And then we have macaques who just hate wearing slacks, run and jump with their knees exposed to the breeze. And then an oyster may be a girl or a boyster, but no one can tell by inspecting its shell. Rabbits have quite simple habits. They hop, sleep, eat, and then repeat. And then to go out of alphabetical order, go back to the letter A, the armadillo makes a terrible pillow. Small, hard, and gray. He keeps walking away. I think I'll end there, and our next reader is the incomparable A.E. Stallings.
I think I got a phone call from John in maybe 1997, and I was sort of floored because he wanted me to be one of the featured poets, and I think up to that point they had all been real poets that I had heard of. And so he went a long way just making me feel like a real poet. I was trying to find, poems of mine that had appeared in Light, and I just remembered, because it turns out almost all of my funny poems have appeared in serious magazines, and John would take the darkly whimsical ones. So these aren't really that funny. Insomniacs Periale. Consciousness isn't easy to lose. Falling asleep's uphill. Unlike your car keys, your patience, your shoes, consciousness isn't easy to lose. Sometimes it takes hypnosis or booze, a blow to the head or a pill. Consciousness isn't easy to lose. Falling asleep's uphill. Lullaby near the railroad tracks. Go back to sleep. The hour is small. A freight train between stations shook you out of sleep with all its lonely ululations. Through the stillness, while you slumber, they trundle down the track, lugging cattle, coal, and lumber, crying, alack, alack. It's cheap to pay the engineer, the moon's a shiny dime. Shut your eyes and you will hear the Doppler shift of time. The hour is small, resume your rest. Tomorrow will be kinder. Here comes a freight train, nosing west, pulling the dawn behind her. Seasonal anxiety. Spring never felt like a beginning, something perhaps to do with school and all the school years slow unspinning, unwound from time as from a spool aimed at summer's golden rule. Beginnings are for autumn days, keen as newly sharpened pencils, the promise of new friends, straight A's with hope, when hopes are drawn as clear as stencils, with yet no errors to erase. Spring comes too late. The incompletes can't be made up. What wasn't learned looks at its neighbor's page and cheats. But failure, too, is something earned. Library books must be returned and fines paid for the overdue procrastinations that accrue. Finals impend, the terms too brief for turning over a fresh leaf. Too late, the daffodils come through. And our next reader is Barbara Litz.
Standing up here is a living experience of the great pleasure I've always taken in being in the company of light poets. So I'm delighted to be here. I stole a joke that begged to be put into rhyme. Rene Descartes drops by a bar to quaff a couple beers. The barkeep says, "You want a shot?" Rene Descartes says, "I think not." Poof, he disappears. The only other poem I have is the one that came here in the latest issue of Light Quarterly, and it's an example of a poem that isn't funny, that has a light form, but perhaps a more serious subject. And I was always pleased to see those in Light Quarterly as well. Thank you, John Mella. Eviction. I'm just the guy they send to change the locks. But what I seen would make your stomach turn. Dead kittens, rotten garbage, baby blocks. Rooms all charred up with stuff they tried to burn. One time I even seen a waterfall come down the stairs, the bathtub falling through the ceiling. You could say I seen it all. I wonder what this country's coming to when people working just as hard as me get caught up in some paper shuffle trick and end up on the street. I get to be the one that catches shit. It makes me sick. I got my job to do. The neighbors stare, like I'm the bad guy, like I didn't care. Thank you.
The first time I got accepted in Light back in 1997, I found out, not with a little written note, those came later, but John Mella called me up on the phone, and I had no idea who he was, and I don't know how he got my phone number, but I heard this rich, mellifluous baritone voice pouring into my ear from Chicago saying he wanted to take a couple of double dactyls I sent him. And then we went on to have a 5-minute conversation about Higgledy-Piggledy, the compendium of double dactyls that John Hollander and Anthony Hecht had put together, and he said, I really appreciate that you used the form exactly the way they said in the introduction. So it was very interesting, and it was a real personal touch, actually, picking up and calling on the phone. One thing we discussed, though, is that Hollander and Hecht did not address the matter of having a muse for the double dactyl, so I took care of it with this poem, which is called Amusing. Higgledy-piggledy, Donna Dactylia whispers ambrosial words to her lovers, even though one may call Hollander, Hecht et al. Bibliophilical, she warms their covers. Many years later, he took a couple more poems of mine, these are not double dactyls, and he suggested that I put it under one umbrella title, so it's called Peer Review, and the first poem is called On Poet Critic. I wish I liked his poetry as much as I like him. He speaks with suavity and verve. His verse is rough and dim. His inoffensive book reviews have won him friends with clout. He might win prizes, but his lines won't last the decade out. And I sent that around to several friends and was surprised by the responses. So this is the second poem after circulating on Poet Critic. Why is it all my friends assume that they should now feel dissed? It seems that though I aimed at one, not one of them was missed. And what about the fellow whom I skewered with my gaff? His hide is so insensitive, my point just made him laugh. And then the most recent one that appeared in Light is in the most recent issue. And I thought this was a serious poem, but no serious journalist would take it, so I sent it to Light. And I want to dedicate it to John Mella. It's a poem about how Lapland hunters were able to track reindeer from miles away by noting magnetic disturbances that they caused to the aurora borealis overhead. And the poem is called Magnetism, and knowing that John's interest in electromagnetism, I want to dedicate it to him because his magnetism through his journal drew us all together over the years and has drawn us together today. And he always had the skill and the vision to recognize and celebrate the light. Magnetism. The reindeer paw the Lapland snow in search of buried moss. And when they strike the rocks below, magnetic ripples cross the curtains of the northern lights, as Lapland hunters know, scanning the sky on brilliant nights, going where reindeer go. Thank you. And the next reader is Alexandra Oliver.
Thank you. Gives me great joy to be here. I sent work to John Mella in 2009, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And finally, 2.5 years later, he let me know that this poem was going to be in the issue, which turned out to be the last one. What a bittersweet, beautiful thing. Thank you, John. Ottawa Walk-in Clinic Waiting Room, 9 p.m. The girl at the desk lives in fear of the phone. The boy in the chair keeps his foot on a plant. The grandma nearby needs to now sleep alone. I read our phone number out like a chant. The college kid barks in the crook of his arm. The bum takes his sock off to check the infection. A poster describes the contagion and harm of love under bridges without one's protection. While cold-hearted bulbs keep an eye on the gloom, our son will not take his prescription of fear, but joyfully buzzes in loops round the room because he's been told there's a bug in his ear. And my second and last poem, my mother always said that a real lady doesn't give too much away. And this is called I Beg You. Never make your heart an open book. Never throw yourself at any man. Don't track him in the supermart with smiles or block him and his shopping in the aisles to point out something printed on a can. Never find his address in the book and drive out there to, well, just take a look, because you'll get caught. And then he'll tell his mates, you're probably the spawn of Norman Bates. Never make your heart an open book. Never talk about the ones before. Never blather on about your ex, his liver, and the soul-destroying sex you had upon his mother's bathroom floor. Spare the details of your last divorce, though he may nod and sagely mutter, brute. It's tossing at him strange and bitter fruit. The bastard's never going to give a hoot about who got the house, the kids, the horse. Never make your heart an open book. Never tell your menfolk how you feel. Never phone them up when you are high and tell them that without them you would die. 'Cause most would rather crush beneath a wheel or fry between a mess of power lines than face another heap of Valentines, a droning ballad, picnic in the park, or weepy tantric yoga in the dark. I know it's hard to stomach this, but I suggest you try. We champion the truth, perhaps, but really, when it comes to chaps, they seem to like it better when you lie. The next reader is Andrew.
Alexandra, sorry, we're going to change the order.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
all right.
Just because time is getting short, I'm going to switch it. The next reader will be David Yezzi.
Was that my fault?
No.
There's a limerick by Robert Conquest, who I was always so thrilled when I saw his poems in light. It's about Philip Toynbee, who was the son of the historian Arnold Toynbee, with whom Conquest disagreed. And it goes like this. One cannot, when dealing with Toynbee, simply pay him back in his own coin, because talking such piss would seem rather amiss. So how would a kick in the groin be? Here's a sonnet by Tom Dish, also someone that I always look forward to reading in light. It's called Bookmark. 4 years ago, I started reading Proust. Although I'm past the halfway point, I still have 700 pages of reduced type left before I reach the end. I will slog through. It can't get much more dull than what is happening now. He's buying Preptachine wraps and a real, well-documented hat for his imaginary Albertine. Oh, what a slimy sort he must have been. So weak, so sweetly poisonous, so fey. 4 years ago, my God. And even then, how I was looking forward to the day I would be able to forgive at last and to forget remembrance of things past. And just one of my own about the character Eloise, Kate Thompson's character Eloise. Lori Laitman, I'm very proud to say, set this as a song, and it appeared in Light magazine. And Eloise, lives at the plaza. She's a spoiled little girl, and she has 2 pets, Skipperdy, who is a turtle, and Weenie, who's a dog. And she visits different places, Paris, Moscow, and this imagines Eloise at a writer's colony. It's called Eloise at Yaddo. You know my name, it's me, Eloise, and I am rather fond of rhymy things, i.e. and namely vis-a-vis poems, and the honest folks who write them, who are often namely poets. Nanny says that poets like the tune of their own voices, and that they ride in old sedans and never in Rolls Royces, which they don't mind, because they're rich in words. That's what they do. They live for them, and when they're old, they die for them. It's true, and rather sad, their clothes are bad. They don't live at the plaza. But Weenie can't manage a villanelle. Neither can Skipper D. So you see, poets still have an upper hand and are rather grand, at least to themselves. And me, Eloise. Melissa, the next reader is?
R.S. Gwynn.
Oh, it is, fine. We're back on schedule. Samuel.
If I lay an egg, I can always fall back on Conti here. I'll keep this. I guess David and I are channeling each other today because I also wanted to read a poem by Robert Conquest, who was the featured poet in the winter 2005-2006 issue. Bob was then at the tender age of 89. He wrote a bunch of poems about a character named Fred, and that book will be published by Waywiser in January, concurrent with Bob's 95th birthday. and it's called Blokelore, because Fred is a bloke. Fred on myth. Though Orpheus won the laurel crown, he drank the bitter cup. Eurydice first let him down, then Maenads tore him up. An Orpheus complex, Fred won't fuss with such an ancient tale, unlike old Freud with Oedipus. The thought, though, turns him pale. Mere myth, but that old Greek thinks Fred, who told the tale is true, had some material in his head on which he later drew. And since David and I are of a single mind today, I'll close with a poem about Tom Dish. Tom died 4 years ago on July the 4th, and those of us who treasured his poetry and loved his criticism, it was a terrible loss. And unfortunately, this is, not exactly a light verse poem, but is an elegy. I guess it will work for John as well. This was a poem that John rejected the first time around, mainly on the basis of his well-known squeamishness about certain words, and it was on the basis of the last word in the poem, and I'm sure I'm the only person who ever managed to get this word past John, because I wrote it back and I said, well, I can't change it, and I don't think Tom would want it changed either, so he said, okay, please. It's called Antiville for Tom Dish. In ante streets the flowers grow, and the dirt is bare on ante lawns, where anti-gardeners sometimes mow the anthills, stifling ante-yawns. The ante-houses have no walls, and the ante-windows are opaque, but ante-nothing cants or falls from ante-storms or ante-quakes. Each ante-man has an anti-wife and anti-children, who may be good, but no one enjoys his anti-life, his anti-drink, and his anti-food. In the ante-evening, no lamps are lit, and the ante-music cannot be heard. At ante-dawn, none enjoy the twit-to-wit of the tuneless ante-bird. On ante-Sundays, everyone goes to worship who else? The Antichrist. And the ante-offering only shows how little has been ante-sacrificed. Is there ante-anything to be said for times when the ante is always upped? Where's the anti-hero who should be read as an antidote to the arch-corrupt? And the only antithesis, anti-art, which is antinomic, thus price is rare, and anticipates every anti-heart and animates all the souls who care. In an ante-room, in an antique chair, with an antimacassar sits the wit, venting his animus everywhere, antic anthems of anti-bullshit.
A couple of things I wanted to mention. Copies of the most recent issue of Light are on sale in the bookstore. They're 50% off the cover price, special conference rate. Go buy them by the bucket. Also the tribute issue that is coming out next. The folks who are putting out this issue back in Chicago are curious about how many copies they want to print. So if you are interested in this issue and you want to put your name and your address and your email just to say, yes, I'm interested in this issue, this will help, and maybe they'll send out a notice or something, with further information about it. There are, I believe, at least one or two other people in the room who are hoping to get up and read a poem of theirs that appeared in Light. I'll be here as long as people want to continue doing that. The first such reader is Andrew Periale, And if there's anyone else here who happens to have brought a poem of theirs that appeared in Light and would like to get up here, that would be wonderful. So, Andrew?
This is the first poem that I ever submitted anywhere. And John wrote back and said he really liked it, but maybe I could change one couplet. And so I did. And then he wrote back again and said, it's almost perfect now, but it might be really just great if you do this one more thing, which I did, and eventually it got published. And I thought submitting poems was always going to be like that. But it never was. Anyway, this is called The Meter Maid. The meter maid studies each car as if it were an artwork in a gallery and makes a decent salary. All the rest of us are on the clock when parked on her block. Death's handmaiden, she tickets without betraying the least hint of emotion, either angry or sublime. She just says, we've run out of time. At night, she props her feet up by the heater and dreams in verse that rhymes, but without exception, lacks meter.
If we don't have any other readers, I think we're finished. Thank you so much for coming. It's been just a joy to read with and listen to all of you. Thank you.